Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. Last night I did a couple of flash videos, one of which, of course, was on Patrick Harvie and his weird rent control wet dream. This plan that he said was being so virtuous, oh look how we're looking after the rental sector, has led to an absolute destruction of the rental sector, and now tenants are paying the price. Rents are increasing at a massive rate because they haven't been up for so long. So every time there's a change of tenant, the rates are going up 10, 15 or even 20% because it's been years since they've been allowed to make inflation rises. So these massive rents, at the same time as so many people, because of regulation, are getting out of the sector, so fewer rental properties on the market. So it is no wonder that people are struggling to find homes in Scotland, and this is all to be laid at the door of the poisonous dwarf, man who does not understand how markets work. Why should he? He's a funny little Marxist. So we'll take a look at this, see what's going wrong, and see why this man should be removed from government forthwith because of all the misery that he directly and personally has caused. Here goes. Patrick Harvie left humiliated as Scottish Government admits rent freeze caused rents to skyrocket as new measures proposed. Well, of course, you've got years of not being able to put them up at all, then years of only giving 3% rather than any kind of market rate increase, because after all, in that period, everything else has gone up. Insurances have gone up, mortgage rates have gone up, the costs of repairs and maintenance have gone up. Everything has gone up, and yet the rents are not allowed to do so. So, of course, at the first opportunity a landlord has when a tenant leaves, bang, and up go the rents to what it should be and would have been had rents been left alone and allowed to increase organically. Indeed, I would suggest they're even higher than if they'd have been left alone, because the landlords have to build in that extra amount, knowing that once they get the new tenant in, they won't be allowed to put the rents up anymore. And so they have to pre-build future rent increases into the price. And that's what's happening. And so now you've got rents that are actually higher than if you'd left them alone. But of course, this little tiny chap does not understand the damage he's causing. He's seen, and we did the story the other day, where they actually looked all around the world wherever rent controls were put in, and where they failed every time. They noted that they'd failed every time, and they still went ahead with it in the arrogant belief that it wouldn't fail for them. Guess what? It's failed. Only here, not only has it failed in terms of retaining and keeping rents down, it's got rid of a lot of rental properties out of the market, which means people who will never ever be in a position to buy their homes have now got fewer houses available to them to rent. The whole rental sector is collapsing. They can't build social homes because all the builders don't want to touch it with a barge pole. And from now on, they've got to build them with heat pumps, and nobody's buying heat pump houses. And so you have this entire construction and rental sector destroyed by one tiny little man. Because when we're going to story coming up later today about another fail of this tiny little man, which is his heat pumps, which I've just mentioned as being the cause of builders not wanting to build houses. How can one man completely and utterly destroy an entire housing sector unless that one man is deliberately setting out to do it? And I think that's what it is. He is spreading his particularly nasty Marxist hatred, and it is damaging people. It's damaging the vulnerable most of all, but ultimately it's damaging the whole of Scotland. All those people who work in construction companies are going to be laid off. Why? Because nobody's buying houses. Why? Because he insists that they have heat pumps and people don't want them. So people, when they go to buy, are going to buy the older houses with the gas central heating. Thank you very much. Meanwhile, all that capital invested in a housing project with those heat pumps, nobody's buying them, and so all that capital is just sitting there. Well, that's no good. These builders need these houses sold. Well done, Harvie. Look at what you've done. Look at the destruction you've caused. Anyway, the Scottish Government bemoaned, and here we go, unintended consequences as it outlined emergency measures to protect tenants when the rent freeze ends, as the rental market has seen huge pricing increase due to the rent freeze. Unintended consequences may be what they're calling it, but everyone, and I mean literally everyone involved in the industry, knew before they'd introduced it that this would happen and that it would be a massive fail. And how do we know that? Because we see it time and time again. Government should never involve itself in the rental sector, because without fail, and all around the world, every time, whenever they do, they make things worse. The market sorts itself out on this. Patrick Harvie has been left humiliated after the Scottish Government admitted that its rent freeze did cause rents to skyrocket across the country. SNP ministers were warned that the flagship Greens policy would cause a housing shortage and expensive tenancies for those not protected. They were warned in advance, and still they did it. This is a problem made exclusively by the SNP. Nowhere else in Britain have you got rent control, and there's a reason. Everywhere else in Britain knows it doesn't work, and this is another example of why it doesn't work. The world isn't made like that. Prices go up. Rents must go up to cover these things. This has come to fruition with Glasgow, Edinburgh and Argyll and Bute all declaring housing emergencies, and rents in Scotland increasing by 12.9% last year, with the average cost of a rental property now £1,097 a month. Now that's 12.9% across the whole market. There will be areas where it's gone up 20%. And why not? Now, if, for example, over the last, let's say for the sake of 5 years, from 19 to 24, let's say over the last 5 years, rents have been allowed to go up organically, they would now not be as high as what the rents are going to be, because you'd have just trickled them up each year. Those 3 years when it was low interest and low inflation, and you'd just put them up a little bit and a little bit and a little bit. Then you did have the year of big inflation. That's fine. And you'd have negotiated with your tenants. You wouldn't have given them a 10% rise, even though inflation was 10%. But you might get a 5 or 6% or something like that. But now it's fallen again. You might go back and have only a 3%. Who knows? But the point is, it wouldn't be as high now as it was, or as it actually is, had rents been allowed to increase. Also, the other thing, of course, was the banning of tenants being thrown out. When that happened, some tenants just stopped paying altogether. Landlords have had enough, and they just go, bang, I'm out of this bloody market, because they can invest that money in the stock market and get the same return without all the crap that goes along with it. And so they are. And of course, this is one of those areas where, again, joined up thinking doesn't occur. Because once you start removing all these properties, it makes a shortfall, it's scarcity. And the laws of supply and demand come in. When something is scarce, the price goes up. C'est la vie. Economics 101. Anyway, the Scottish Government has suggested temporary rent controls due to the cap and eviction moratorium coming to an end, meaning rents would be unfrozen. Mr Harvie wants to temporarily change the rent adjudication process until April the 1st, 2025, which allows increases of 6%, provided the total rent is not more than the market value. In its statement, whatever that means, in its statement of reasons for this change, ministers admit that landlords will be aiming to set their rent by referencing the open market, which could result in very steep and unmanageable rent increases for tenants. A failure of Harvie's making. He's the one who's pushed all this, and now it's coming back and biting him. And he's going, well, nobody foresaw it. It was unforeseen circumstances. It wasn't unforeseen. Everybody told you in advance. Your decision was to proceed. Why? Because you are a Marxist and you don't like the idea of people being able to control their own property. The document adds... Oh, sorry, missed a bit. In a statement for reasons for this change, ministers admit the landlords will be aiming to set their reference by reference to the open market, which could result in very steep and unmanageable rent increases for tenants. I just said that. Here we go. This is due to a lack of properties available, because a lot of people have got out, and rents being more expensive due to being locked in, as a mid-contract rise is not allowed. And so what they do is they pre-build in... How long do you stay for? Probably a couple of years, right? They pre-build in the rent rises in advance. That's what they do. The policy document adds, the Scottish Government recognised the potential for some unintended consequences when the rent cap ends. It must have been intended. They can't say it was unintended. If they knew in advance what was going to happen and they still did it, then they must have intended it to happen. Otherwise, they wouldn't have done it. Surely the logic here is sound. It can't be unintended if you know it's going to happen. And he said, any changes made to the adjudication process would be intended to smooth the transition out of the rent cap and protect tenants from steep rent increases, which could be experienced if there's a sudden move to open market rent from rent levels that have been suppressed. Well, if you suppress them and then release them, it's going to be like a champagne cork, isn't it? Landlords will be able to return their rent prices to the open market value, while also allowing tenants to apply to the Rent Service Scotland or for the first tier tribunal if they feel the rent increase is unwarranted. If the gap between the rent currently being paid by the tenant and its value on the open market is more than 6%, the price will be allowed to increase by 0.33% for every percentage point above that level, capped at a total of 12%. Now, what they're saying, capped at a total of 12%, means every rent in Scotland is about to rise by 12%. Bang, 12% increase. And that's it. And what can you do? These people have caused this problem and it isn't going away. Scottish Tories pointed out that this was a stark admission that for all the concerns raised about the policy has happened. For all the concerns raised about this, the policy has happened. Shadow Cabinet Secretary for Social Security, Housing and Equalities, Miles Briggs, told the Scottish Daily Express the SNP Green government weren't just warned by others of their rent freeze wouldn't work. Their own research pointed out the dangers and they went ahead anyway. And that's why it's in the state it is. There he is. There he is. Hat-trick Pervy, the weirdest man in politics. A man who thinks everything he does is right and it turns everything out he does is wrong. Not one thing has he ever got right. But then he's a very stupid man who's never had a real job and likes to share the podium with members of Pi. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? Funny, you know, they're talking about rent and Patrick Harvie. First thing I hear with Patrick Harvie and rent is boy. But maybe that's just the impression he gives. Anyway, I'm coming up. I get the impression Harvie is a very depressed man. He wakes up every morning, he stands on his tiptoes and looks in the mirror, and he sees the face of Patrick Harvie looking back at him, and he thinks, I wonder what I'm going to do that's going to fail again today. Because every day he fails. He fails at everything. Not one thing that man has ever done has succeeded. Except, of course, his desire to get on everyone's tits. Been an absolute success on that. Anyway, I shall stop there. Thank you very much for watching. Do please hit the subscribe button, ring the bell, leave a like, leave a comment. Please share the video. And until next time, stay safe, stay well, and I will speak to you later. Bye.